Wait a minute, you. A beautiful doctor who looked familiar called out to me. But now wasn't the time for small talk. The pregnant woman comes first. At my words, she walked away with a look of regret on her face. The next day, things took a sudden turn. Alright, let's settle this. Our mystery-solving journey, which started from a trivial bet over 20 years ago, connected to someone's unimaginable thoughts. My name is Michael, a 38-year-old single, ordinary guy. I call myself ordinary because I believe there's nothing special about me. Just a typical person living a mundane life. That's me. I left Japan at 18 and went abroad alone. I wondered if living a normal life, going to high school, then college, then getting a job, would truly make me happy. I wasn't particularly good at studying. However, my father was a former military officer and my mother was Japanese, so I spoke both English and Japanese fluently. But since native English and the English taught in Japan are quite different, my test scores were just average, making me seem only somewhat good at English. Depending on the situation, my father had blonde hair and blue eyes, and my mother had black hair and black eyes. So I was born with dominant black hair and black eyes. I have a middle name, but I usually live as Michael, a typical Japanese person, surprising people when they find out I'm half. I had a dream of seeing the wider world, so I told my parents I was leaving Japan without taking the university entrance exams. I expected them to oppose the idea and prepared various excuses, but they saw me off without a word. Thus, I went abroad as soon as I graduated high school, and 20 years have passed since then. Now 38, I'm still single, without a girlfriend, and not even looking for one. No, maybe I couldn't make one. The shadow of a girl I spent my youth with still lingers in my mind. It's like a curse. I hadn't been able to visit home because of work, but now that things have settled down, I decided to return to my family home in a rural town in Japan. I hadn't told my parents about the trip to surprise them, and with a pounding heart, I boarded the plane. The hometown I returned to after so long had changed a lot in 20 years. I used to commute to high school in the neighboring town by train. And the nearest station I used daily during those 3 years looked completely different from my memory. The stand-up soba shop under the dim lights was gone, replaced by a famous donut shop. Next to it were 2 fast food restaurants, with lines of middle and high school students in casual clothes. Back when I was a student, there were no such places, and we used to chat on the couches in a small shopping mall. Things have changed a lot with time. A little further, there was a souvenir shop, a convenience store, and a trendy cafe where students chatted and studied. It felt like I had wandered into another world. This was no longer the hometown I knew. As I walked towards the taxi stand with my suitcase, a large building I didn't recognize came into view. At the same time, the taxi driver I had booked got out, loaded my luggage into the trunk, and started chatting with me. "Hey there, are you visiting family?" "Oh, yes. I've been away for over 20 years. "In that case, you must be surprised by how much this town has developed. This is a condo, the first high-rise in this town. It was fully booked in no time. Apparently, the same company is building similar high-rises elsewhere, and they are already receiving inquiries. Moreover, the first floor has a 24-hour gym with a cafe, and above it, there are cram schools and tutoring centers. The cram school I attended in middle school is now in one of these high-rises, not in an old, shabby building. As I rode in the taxi, looking out the window, I saw more buildings that seemed out of place in this rural town. I passed by my old elementary and middle schools. The once dilapidated buildings were now completely renovated and shiny, with no trace of the past. While the town's development and population growth were good signs, it also felt a bit sad. It would take about 30 minutes by car to get to my parents' house. Since it was lunchtime and the main roads were crowded, I asked the driver to take a back road. On the way, while waiting at a red light and looking out the window, I noticed a woman. She was crouching and appeared to be in pain, which I thought was clearly an emergency situation. "Excuse me, that woman over there, she looks unwell." The taxi driver noticed too and quickly pulled over. I rushed out of the taxi to help the woman. I saw the maternity mark on her bag. A pregnant woman in distress was clearly a serious situation, so I immediately thought of calling an ambulance. Given the traffic on the main road, it might take a while. "Are you okay? Where's your doctor?" The taxi driver, who had also gotten out, asked the woman. she replied in a faint voice that her clinic was just ahead. In that case, it's faster to take her in the taxi than wait for an ambulance. We decided to rush her to the obstetrician 500 meters away. The woman was already in labor, but luckily the taxi was equipped as a maternity taxi, with clean towels and other supplies. We managed the situation while I contacted the hospital. They said they would prepare for delivery, and I followed their instructions. As soon as we arrived, the woman was taken on a stretcher to the delivery room. At that moment, a beautiful doctor, who seemed to be in charge, glanced at me and said, "Wait a minute, are you," with a puzzled look. I ignored her and said, "Just take care of the mother and baby." Then, the female doctor suddenly came to her senses and simply said, "I'm sorry," before disappearing into the delivery room just like before. Within 15 minutes, we heard the baby's first cry, and the taxi driver and I both breathed a sigh of relief. I didn't know the pregnant woman. I couldn't stay there any longer, so I decided to leave. 10 minutes later, I arrived at my parents' house. When I went to pay the taxi fare, it was surprisingly cheap. When I asked why, the driver explained. "I stopped the meter while we helped the pregnant woman. So, you don't need to pay for that part." I thought for a moment and said, "All right," handing him a $100 bill. When he tried to give me change, I said, "Consider it a tip for guiding me around the changed town and for quickly helping the pregnant woman." I got out of the taxi as he kept bowing his head in gratitude. After ensuring the taxi left, I rang the doorbell of my house. After a moment, my mother, who had aged but still bore traces of her younger self, appeared. She froze for a moment, eyes wide, then laughed heartily and welcomed me. "You've grown so tall. You surprised me by coming suddenly. Come on in." In the living room, my father was watching something on his smartphone. Curious about what he was watching so intently, my mother came over and whispered in my ear, "Your father's been hooked on this masked band. You know, he's American, so he loves this kind of thing. He's always saying, 'When are they coming to Japan?'" After hearing this, I turned my attention back to my father. Then he started talking without even greeting me. I feel the soul in the music of these four. The bass that controls the deep tones, the guitar that truly enjoys the music, the drums that hold it all together, and the vocalist whose soul comes through even through the screen. Everything about them is cool and amazing. After chatting with my parents for a while, I went back to my room. The room where I spent my childhood through high school was just as it had been, as if it had been frozen in time. I ran my finger along the window and desk, but not a speck of dust came off. Imagining how my mother must have cared for this room filled me with warmth. Then, we had dinner together, enjoyed family time, and I took a long soak in the bath. Having lived abroad for so long, it felt soothing to experience the unique Japanese culture of soaking in a hot bath again. I slept in a warm bed, and the next morning, I was awakened by the sound of my parents arguing with someone. Right now, I'm wearing a sweatsuit. Thinking it would be inappropriate to go out like this, I quickly changed and went downstairs. At the entrance, my parents were arguing with an unfamiliar middle-aged man. When he saw me, his eyes widened in anger and he shouted, "Is it you? You scoundrel! How dare you deceive my daughter? I won't forgive you. You'll take responsibility for this. Please calm down. I can't believe our son would do such a thing. Besides, he only returned 2 days ago." My mother tried to intervene, but the man, in his rage, wouldn't listen. Honestly, I had no idea what he was talking about. From his words, I gathered he thought I had caused some trouble with a woman. However, I hadn't been in contact with any women. The only female contact in my personal phone was my mother. Wondering what this could be about, I realized that the man was the father of the pregnant woman I had taken to the hospital yesterday. He had somehow mistaken me for his daughter's ex-boyfriend and came here in a rage. It made sense that my mother denied it without needing to hear from me. After all, I had just returned to Japan yesterday. I didn't think the hospital would have violated confidentiality and given out my information. But I did recall one thing. When I took her to the hospital yesterday, she insisted on thanking me and asked for my contact information. My contact information? No, I didn't do anything worth being thanked for. Helping someone in need is just the right thing to do. Even though I declined, when she insisted, I couldn't argue any further. So, I only told her that I live nearby. I didn't think that alone would identify me, but apparently, the father had overheard nurses talking about me at the hospital. The man who brought Emily here left without saying anything. Really? Could he be the baby's father? Emily's unmarried, right? Yes, that's what I heard. The midwife tried to find out during counseling, but she didn't say. But since it's her decision, the hospital can't intervene. The father somehow concluded that her ex had abandoned her after she got pregnant, only to reappear and then disappear after bringing her to the hospital. I don't think most people would jump to such conclusions, but he must have panicked after suddenly finding out he had a grandchild. If I had a daughter who suddenly said I had a baby but there is no father, I'd probably freak out too. Naturally, he questioned his daughter. But she didn't tell him anything. Therefore, thinking that probing further wouldn't get him any answers, he casually said, "It seems a kind person brought you here to get some information from his daughter." She laughed and talked about me, mentioning that I live around here and that I look like I might be of mixed race. From that description, he guessed it was us. Given that my father was a former military man and my mother loved to chat, our family stood out. And that's why he came storming in today. This misunderstanding was getting out of hand, and my mother was considering calling the police. I explained that I didn't know the woman, and yesterday was the first time we met. I just returned from overseas yesterday, so really, I don't want to hear excuses. Emily is my precious daughter, and how did it come to this? It seemed the daughter's name was Emily. Emily's father's anger didn't subside, and the argument only heated up, getting us nowhere. We can't resolve this ourselves. Emily is still in the hospital after giving birth. And we shouldn't burden her now. Maybe we should consult the police. At that moment, a third party spoke up. This man is not your daughter's ex-boyfriend. Everyone turned their gaze to the person standing behind Emily's father. It was the beautiful obstetrician who had wanted to say something to me yesterday. He really just happened to help Emily, who went into labor on the street, and brought her to the hospital by taxi. If your daughter finds out about this misunderstanding, it will surely upset her. I understand your concern, but please calm down. But, Dr. Smith, I can vouch for him, he is not a bad person. Even with her reassurance, Emily's father still seemed unconvinced. However, he couldn't argue against the words of his daughter's doctor and ended up glaring at me instead. Then, my usually quiet father suddenly spoke up. I didn't raise my son to mistreat someone else's daughter. I swear to God. My son is not that kind of man, and if he were, I would straighten him out myself. Though in his late 60s, my father's presence was still imposing, given his military background. Even I, his son, was left speechless and held my breath. Emily's father finally grasped the situation and apologized, admitting he was wrong to make assumptions without any evidence. My mother looked at me. Surely, she wants me to decide what to do with this person. I sighed and said, misunderstandings happen. Please try to stay calm and think things through next time. Then, Emily's father, his face turning bright red, said, I'm sorry. And walked away. Dr. Smith then asked if I was really okay with forgiving him. My parents seemed to share her concern, but I shrugged and replied. When I was younger, I clashed with many people due to misunderstandings and faced numerous setbacks. I'm sure he loves his daughter more than anything. Otherwise, he wouldn't have acted so boldly, right? My father sighed softly and said, You're right. If that's how you feel, then I won't say anything more. Honey, is that okay with you? And returned to the living room sofa. My mother then looked at the doctor and made a surprised sound. Wondering what was going on, I watched as my mother hesitantly asked, Are you Sarah? The doctor, now identified as Sarah, smiled warmly and replied, It's been a long time, ma'am. My mother's tense expression instantly transformed into one of joy. Smiling cheerfully, she started a rapid-fire conversation with the female doctor called Sarah. Oh my goodness, it is you, Sarah. When did you come back? You've become so beautiful. Why didn't you tell us sooner? My mother, known for her talkativeness, showed no signs of stopping, so I intervened and asked her to bring us some tea. Hearing the name Sarah, I also remembered. "Are you Sarah Smith, who sat next to me for 3 years in high school?" Then the female doctor, or rather Sarah, nodded. Then she said something unexpected. "Emily's father being here was a coincidence. I came for a different reason. We still haven't settled our old bet. I came to finalize it." I pondered what she meant, and then a memory surfaced. It was right after we started high school. Sarah had said something out of the blue that day. "Hey, let's see who can get a perfect score on Mrs. Johnson's test first. And let's compete on all our test scores." Mrs. Johnson was our English teacher, known for her incredibly tough tests. Even I often found myself saying, despite being fairly good at English. Even Sarah, who was fluent in everyday conversations, had only managed to score a maximum of 98 points. This competition continued into our senior year, but I decided to go abroad, so I started slacking on my studies. I didn't plan on going to college, so I barely studied and skipped the last test of the second term due to a cold. Not even bothering with the makeup exam. It seemed that was what she was referring to. "We might have had a winner in that last test, but you did nothing." "Yeah, so you won by default, Sarah." "What? How can I be satisfied with that?" Before I could ask what she meant, Sarah handed me a test paper and an answer sheet. Confused, I looked at her, and she replied with a confident smile. I kept the last test and printed it out from my computer. Sarah seemed fully determined. It was clear she wouldn't leave unless I accepted the challenge, so I reluctantly agreed. As I glanced at the test, I thought. Back then, I found these tests difficult, but now I could solve them with ease. When I was younger, I only knew English because my father spoke it, without any real experience abroad. However, having spent the past 20 years overseas, this test felt like elementary school level to me. But then I got stuck on the last question. Noticing my hesitation, Sarah laughed and said, "I got stuck on that one too." It made me go huh, and I ended up with 99 points. If I'd gotten it right, I would have had 100. Despite thinking it over, I couldn't find the answer and ended up guessing. After grading the test, I scored the same 99 points as Sarah. So it's a tie. We never settled the score after all. As she said that, I noticed her phone vibrating in her pocket. It seemed the hospital was calling, and after enjoying the tea and snacks my mother had prepared, Sarah left. My mother watched her go with a look of regret. Thinking she might know something about Sarah, I asked. Apparently, after graduating high school, Sarah went to a top medical university in Japan. Her father had originally run the hospital, and my mother, who usually saw a family doctor in a neighboring town, hadn't realized Sarah had taken over. Sarah took over her father's hospital and is now the director. I was surprised to hear that from the neighbors. She came back just a week ago. I was amazed at how my mother, with her wide social circle, had already gathered so much information within an hour. But more than that, I was struck by Sarah. She had indeed become a doctor. Since she had top grades, it wasn't surprising, but it made me reflect on our different paths. Yet, something still bothered me. That question. Even if this is the correct answer, it doesn't sit right with me. Why did Mrs. Johnson consider this correct? My mother tilted her head in confusion. Despite pondering it, I couldn't find the truth. Realizing it was futile to think about it further, I pushed it out of my mind. The following days passed uneventfully until 2 days before my return abroad. In the evening, we had a visitor, and when I answered the door, there stood Emily, holding her baby. "Thank you for your help the other day. My father also caused a lot of trouble, and I'm terribly sorry." Behind her stood her father, looking uncomfortable. "It's okay, I don't care about it." When I said that, both Emily and her father looked relieved. They had brought cakes from a famous local bakery as a thank you. Not wanting to be rude by refusing, I accepted the cakes, and they bowed repeatedly before leaving. When I told my mother about this, she happily poured tea and transferred the cakes onto plates. My parents had a sweet tooth. Since we received the cakes as an apology, we decided to enjoy them. The rich cream and the tartness of the strawberries created a delightful taste that made me smile. As my father, who loved sweets, ate his cake, he suddenly became talkative. I can feel the soul in this cake. It's truly delicious. At that moment, I had a realization and rushed upstairs to my room. I read the last question I had missed once more. Why did Kathy cry here? The final question of the long passage was straightforward, and the answer should have been option 2. Sarah had also naturally chosen it and ended up being wrong. It seemed like something that could be guessed, but the answer required a reason, and no one had gotten it right. I decided to read the English text again, carefully and thoroughly, immersing myself in the emotions of the characters. As I did, I suddenly realized the answer and found myself running. I headed to Sarah's hospital. She might be busy with deliveries, so I wasn't sure if I could see her, but fortunately, she was taking a break and drinking coffee in the courtyard. Seeing me out of breath, Sarah widened her eyes. What's wrong? Why are you in such a hurry? I figured out the answer to that question. Sarah leaned forward in surprise. No way. Mrs. Johnson only gave us the answer, not the reason. I slowly began explaining the strange question. The story itself was ordinary, and the other questions were solvable with normal thinking. But I remembered something. If you read carefully, you could see that Kathy was modeled after a famous person. This person was known for saying, "There are no solutions in life. There is only the forward motion. Solutions come afterward." So, from the preceding sentences, I deduced. Why did Kathy cry? Was it because she was sad about parting with her fiancé? Was it sadness that brought tears? No. What if she was modeled after this famous person? Sarah seemed to realize something too, and muttered, "No way." Then a nurse called out to Sarah. A woman was rapidly progressing in labor, and Sarah needed to go immediately. Let's meet at that place and check the answer. With that, Sarah flashed a radiant smile like the sun and said, "This time, we'll settle the score," before running off. The morning of my flight arrived. The flight was in the evening, so I planned to leave town after lunch. Sarah showed up at the agreed place. She had arranged for another OB/GYN to cover for her and had the morning free. I visited the home of our former mentor, Mrs. Johnson, with Sarah, who had her phone in her hand saying that she would return immediately if anything unexpected happened. However, the nameplate on the door in front of me says Kenneth. Both Sarah and I knew where Mrs. Johnson lived because we had been under her care. When we rang the doorbell and saw the person who answered, we were shocked. It wasn't Mrs. Johnson who came out, but Emily, the pregnant woman from before. Emily, who had been surprised to see us, quickly understood when we mentioned Mrs. Johnson, and she invited us into the living room. It turned out Mrs. Johnson had dementia and was now living in a care facility. Emily was her granddaughter. Grandma has forgotten about me and Dad. She's even forgotten that she changed her last name when she got married. I heard some things about you too. As I was wondering what was going on, Emily took out a letter and said, "I have 2 unforgettable students. They secretly competed to see who could score 100 on my test first." This letter starts with those words. Sarah and I realized she was talking about us and held our breath. Emily continued reading slowly. This question was almost made for the 2 of them. So, there is no answer. That is the answer. I believe Michael and Sarah will find the truth and come here. This is where the letter ends. Emily handed us the letter. After a moment of silence, Sarah spoke up. Kathy didn't cry out of sadness. She cried out of anger at herself for not having a solution, and then out of hope because she knew she had to move forward. The answer didn't exist in the choices. Not existing was the answer. I nodded in agreement, having reached the same conclusion. We thanked Emily and left her house, talking as we walked to the station. How did you realize the trick? I didn't understand at first either, but my father's use of the word soul made everything click. Reading the text, I always felt there was something off about it. The story seemed to be guiding us towards something, structured in a way that made it unsettling for someone proficient in English. I realized that Mrs. Johnson wanted us to see the soul that resided in this girl. She was modeled after a famous person, and from his famous quote, I derived the answer. It's very like Mrs. Johnson. She always loved French authors. And this famous person was also a French writer. Sarah nodded slowly, then looked puzzled. By the way, your father always talked about soul and spirit, didn't he? Yeah, he's a romantic. I guess I inherited that from him. Then I realized another trick. Soul, that's it. My father, despite being a former military man, had wide connections, including French authors. And I knew he had a private friendship with Mrs. Johnson. This connection was how I knew Mrs. Johnson's house. And my father was the only person who knew about my other side. Maybe my father had talked to Mrs. Johnson. Mrs. Johnson knew about my dreams, that's why she created such a question. No, it makes sense. She probably knew my heart better than I did. I finally felt like the dots that had puzzled me were connecting. I am currently an artist traveling around the world. When I left for overseas, I confided in my father that I wanted to be a musician who plays with soul. I'm sure Mrs. Johnson knew about this through her friendship with my father. She wanted to convey his feelings to me through the test. She wanted to encourage me, in two senses. There is only the force to move forward. Solutions come afterward. Kathy wasn't modeled after a famous person but after me. I recalled how Mrs. Johnson, always silent and inscrutable, cared deeply for me and Sarah. I was muttering something to myself, and Sarah looked confused, but we had arrived at the station. Hey, I don't understand. What do you mean by your heart and that Kathy was modeled after you? What are you talking about? I laughed and answered Sarah. I think we'll meet again in 6 months. I'll explain then. I pointed to her phone vibrating in her pocket. Is it an emergency? Good luck. She hurriedly answered the call, and I waved with a smile as I boarded the train. 6 months later, I returned to Japan as promised and visited Sarah. In front of her, eager for the answer, I knelt and presented a small box. I chose the path of an artist, but I could never forget you. Even when I went abroad, your face kept appearing in my mind, and it still does. I didn't recognize you at first because you had become so beautiful. How can we fulfill both our dreams? Do we have to give one up? No. Solutions will come afterward. Sarah, will you date me with marriage in mind? Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she took the silver ring, her face crinkling into a smile. Do you mean you found a way to achieve both dreams? Choosing between your dream and being with me? Really? Both Mrs. Johnson and you are so roundabout. Yes, I will. Mrs. Johnson must have known I had feelings for Sarah. Like my father, a romantic, she encouraged me through the English test. Though she couldn't intervene directly, she wanted to help his troubled students. That was the kind of person Mrs. Johnson was. After my public proposal, we received applause and cheers from those around us. A year later, we were married and spent the last day before moving into our new home at my parents' house. My father, unusually drunk, needed help to his bedroom, so my mother and I assisted him. When we entered his room, I was stunned. These are photos of the masked artist, all of the vocalist. Did Dad like them that much? My mother laughed gracefully. Your father has always loved soul music. He says he feels a close connection to the soul in those lyrics. As we laid my father in bed, he murmured softly, I love that vocalist more than anyone in the world. After all, he's my pride and joy. Tears welled up, and my mother gently patted my back. 2 years later, Sarah has returned to work after giving birth, and our days have been busy. So, are you done with your artist activities? Yeah, I am. I kept hiding my face because I didn't know who I was. But I don't need to do that anymore. The vocalist of that band has to be someone who doesn't know who they are. The members told me I'm obsolete now. Sarah laughed and continued. Well, they all seem to wish you happiness. Even the first song with the new vocalist seemed to be dedicated to you. Listening to that song, I thought those guys had done something really thoughtful. Then I remembered Emily. The new vocalist who joined the masked band I used to be part of is Japanese. Watching him on screen, Emily had tears in her eyes. The girl Kathy in the problem Mrs. Johnson made. She too saw off her fiancé who left to pursue his dreams. And Kathy chose to live strong. Emily is probably the same. Without revealing who the father is, she became a wonderful mother, raising her child with her family. Everyone has one or two secrets. I hoped that happiness would come to Emily and the new vocalist. Oh, let's go visit Mrs. Johnson sometime and tell him our news. That's a great idea. She might not remember us, but we'll be just like old friends having tea. As we chatted about such trivial things, I savored the happiness I had finally grasped with my own hands. How long are you going to stay there? Get out and wait outside, you useless old man. During a negotiation with a client that could potentially bring in $30 million in sales, my manager, Lily, was trying to pin all the responsibility on me. It turned out we couldn't use the originally proposed material for the product. And she wanted to make it seem like I was the one who wrote the proposal in the first place. Following her orders, I stepped outside to look for someone. But before I could even start looking, I saw him walking down the hallway towards me. Oh, it's you, Chris. Is the meeting over already? I was acquainted with Mr. Smith, the client's CEO. After confirming the reason for the material change, we entered the conference room together. Do you know who this is? Ha! Unaware that she was about to start her life of downfall, Lily continued to insist it wasn't her fault. My name is Chris. At 45, I had changed jobs, embarking on a new chapter in my life. My new workplace was Adams Manufacturing, a company that started as a small metalworking shop. When a major client suddenly cut ties with them, they attempted a comeback by creating their own products, which turned out to be a huge success. Now, anyone who hears the name Adams Manufacturing knows them as the company that made those famous pots. Recognized by cooking enthusiasts everywhere. I was excited for my dreams to come true here as I started my first day. Assigned to the planning and development department, I was escorted there by Mr. Adams himself. However, just as we arrived, he got a call from a key client and asked me to get further details from the department manager, Lily. Nervous since this was my first job change, I opened the door with trembling hands. Starting today, I'll be working here. My name is Chris. It's a pleasure to meet you all. A woman approached me in response to my introduction. I'm the manager, Lily. Nice to meet you. I had heard that Lily, at just 30 years old, had become the head of the planning and development department, a person Mr. Adams had high hopes for. Given her young age, I was worried she might have a harsh personality, but her gentle smile eased my concerns. Mr. Adams has told me a lot about you, Lily. I'm honored to work under someone like you. Looking back, even as a newcomer, I was 15 years older than her. While transitioning gradually might have been okay, I should have found it odd that she used no formal language with me right from the start. I've heard about you too from Mr. Adams. You enjoy going to afternoon tea, right? I often go as part of my hobbies, but my real passion is. Before I could finish explaining, Lily burst out laughing, leaving me stunned. A 45-year-old man with a hobby like afternoon tea? I struggled to keep from laughing in front of Mr. Adams when he told me. How could you proudly declare such an embarrassing hobby? No one would be unaffected by having their favorite things ridiculed. As I fell silent, Lily continued her attack. Our company often gets media attention, you know? I can't imagine someone who switched jobs at 45 has any real talent. But I'd hate for people to find out that a creepy old man like you came up with a product that might not sell because of it. None of your ideas will see the light of day. That's all I wanted to say. Lily then delegated all the necessary work explanations to a nearby colleague. The next moment, she returned to her desk as if I didn't exist. Despite what Lily said, not submitting ideas while in the planning department would be like not working at all. Hoping she might change her mind after seeing my proposal, I submitted several, but all were promptly rejected. Stop wasting paper and my time. I'm busy with Smith's project. Lily threw back the proposal papers without even looking at them. The A4 sheets, still clipped together, hit my face, scattering across the floor as the clip came loose. As I was about to break under the strain, the familiar name of the company brought me back to reality. Is Smith from Smith Corporation? Yes, our important client. Surely you know that much? Smith Corporation specializes in kitchenware. They don't manufacture their own products but select items they deem good to sell in their stores. According to Lily, they were planning to open a store focused on tea products. And we were tasked with producing a stainless steel teapot to be their flagship item. With a price around $100, and being a collaboration between us and Smith Corporation, it was expected to sell well, potentially bringing in $30 million in sales. Mr. Adams mentioned you should prepare the proposal for Smith's project. I guess he thinks of it as a training exercise. But who knows what he's thinking? I understand, I'll have it ready by the end of the day. Lily laughed derisively at my prompt agreement. You don't need to make it. I'll do it all. I'll let you sit in on the meeting, but don't say a word. Understood. Then, could I see the proposal you've prepared beforehand? Lily looked genuinely confused by my request. What are you talking about? A newcomer sitting in on the meeting doesn't get to speak. Therefore, there's no need for you to see the proposal. Just act like you don't exist and don't get in my way. Got it? A month later, I attended the meeting with Smith Corporation. Following Lily's instructions, I silently listened to the conversation. The product Lily had developed for our important client was impeccable in both design and functionality. It was the kind of product I would want to buy myself. The client's representative was also impressed, and the discussion progressed smoothly. Feeling unnecessary, I casually flipped through the proposal. Things took a drastic turn a few days later. When Lily received a phone call, she stood up abruptly. What do you mean now? Do you know who I am? Wait a minute. After arguing with the caller for a few minutes, she stormed out of the office, clutching her company phone. A colleague who had answered the call first told me it was Tony, our factory manager. Given the timing, it had to be about the product we were developing with Smith Corporation. While I worried, Lily returned with an unsettling smile. Chris, we need to go see Mr. Smith tomorrow. Make sure you're there. Her sweet tone gave me a bad feeling. I'll send you the new proposal once it's ready. Review it before tomorrow. Am I allowed to see it this time? On second thought, you need to see it to learn. Read my perfect proposal and use it someday. Within an hour, the new proposal was in my inbox. Since Lily had quickly collected the previous proposal and I didn't have access to the files, I couldn't be sure. But it didn't seem like much had changed. It was odd that there were no changes despite the heated phone call. Still uneasy, I attended the second meeting the next day. As I tried to sit down in the client's conference room, Lily grabbed my shoulders and made me stand. Actually, the content presented last time was developed by Chris here. He is a promising newcomer personally scouted by Adams. Since he didn't have presentation experience, I did it on his behalf, but this time he will present himself. Lily whispered in my ear. Make the most of this chance I gave you. Confused, I began reading through the proposal under Lily's direction. There were no changes from the previous proposal, yet I had to start the explanation from scratch, which made no sense to me. I wondered if the client wouldn't find it odd to hear the same pitch again, but they seemed to be watching my presentation with interest. Likely understanding that I was new. What on earth was happening? Wait a minute, isn't the stainless steel composition different from last time? With the client's comment, I finally understood Lily's intent. The more chromium and nickel in stainless steel, the more resistant it is to rust. In Lily's initial proposal, the composition had 20% chromium and 20% nickel. This ratio minimizes the metallic taste and smell to a level even top chefs wouldn't notice. However, this also made the material harder to work with. It was a product that only Adams Manufacturing could produce, and the clients loved it for that. My apologies, but it seems Chris here created the proposal without consulting our craftsmen. We were informed that they couldn't manufacture the product as proposed, so we recommend using 18-8 stainless steel instead. I see. 18-8 is still good quality, but it's disappointing. I'm terribly sorry. The client's response soured noticeably. Sensing an opportunity, Lily moved to get rid of me. Why are you still here? Get out and wait outside, you useless old man. Lily likely planned to pin the entire blame on me if the deal fell through. Following her orders, I stepped outside to look for someone. But before I could even start looking, I saw him walking down the hallway towards me. Oh, it's you, Chris. Is the meeting over already? George Smith, the CEO of Smith Corporation, and I were acquainted. No, I got kicked out. Kicked out? You? Surprised, Mr. Smith listened as I briefly explained the situation, then I called our factory. After confirming the reason for the change in stainless steel, I received the expected response. Determined to point out Lily's mistake in front of Mr. Smith, we entered the conference room. "Weren't you supposed to go back to the office?" Lily fell silent when she saw Mr. Smith enter behind me. "Mr. Smith, it's been a while. Did my subordinate cause you any trouble?" Mr. Smith, visibly displeased, took a seat. "Oh, he's caused a lot of trouble. I sincerely apologize for that. I'll make sure Chris faces the proper consequences when we get back." Mr. Smith, leaning on the table with both elbows, glared at Lily. "Not Chris. You caused the trouble." The force of his words made Lily falter. "Are you talking about the stainless steel issue?" While I do bear responsibility for the lack of training, the change in material was entirely Chris's fault. "Oh? Even now, you're still blaming Chris? You know the numerous products I've developed, Mr. Smith. Are you really going to believe a newcomer over someone as skilled and experienced as me?" Despite having something to hide, Lily confidently described herself as skilled and experienced, and in a way, I respected her for it. If I could be as thick-skinned as she is, life would certainly be easier. "Do you know who this man is?" "Who? Chris? Who else?" "Chris is well known among tea enthusiasts. As Mr. Smith mentioned, my passion for tea had led me and my wife to frequent afternoon tea spots, which I documented on social media, gaining a large following. My reviews would boost reservations, attracting the attention of various companies. While I loved visiting tea shops, I preferred enjoying tea at home, and I had a particular interest in teacups and teapots. When I expressed my dream of creating the perfect teapot on social media, Adams Manufacturing reached out to me, which eventually brought Smith Corporation into the conversation. I was so committed to creating something I could be proud of that I decided to change careers to pursue this opportunity. "Mr. Adams told you, didn't he? Chris must be involved in this project." "Yes." Lily seemed to think it was just for training. Embarrassed at being humiliated in front of a client, Lily turned red. "Mr. Adams didn't explain it properly. I assumed it was just for training purposes. It's only natural to think a newcomer wouldn't be tasked with a crucial client proposal." "So, you only had him sit in for training?" "Yes, is that a problem?" Lily still didn't realize the contradiction in her story. "That's strange. You yourself said Chris developed this proposal. Isn't that contradictory?" Lily, suddenly realizing her mistake, hurriedly tried to explain. "At first, he was just supposed to sit in. But I changed my mind midway and decided to have him create the proposal." Mr. Smith didn't bother listening to Lily's excuses and signaled to me. I confirmed with Tony earlier. "Lily, you've been making unreasonable demands on the craftsman for a while now, haven't you?" The product Lily designed was difficult to manufacture, even for our experienced craftsmen. Moreover, Lily insisted on taking credit for the $30 million deal. After the previous presentation, she told the craftsman, "The client has already approved it, so changes are impossible," and tried to force them to make it. Her outrageous demands infuriated the craftsmen. They refused to make it and even told Tony that manufacturing it was impossible. That was the argument Lily had on the phone the other day. "I apologize for the inconvenience, but could we have another chance? This time, let me propose the product I developed." "Of course. As long as it's the product Chris developed, it will be meaningful. I'll speak to Mr. Adams about it." The meeting concluded with that. Lily, who was told that the incident would be reported to our CEO, returned to the office with a heavy heart. Over the next few days, I worked on drafting a proposal for the teapot I had envisioned even before joining the company. To ensure its feasibility, I took the proposal to the factory to consult with the craftsman. I've outlined my ideas here. Considering mass production, do you think it's feasible? The craftsman, though not particularly friendly, patiently explained the points that needed improvement and how the costs were higher than I had anticipated. Lily sat quietly, listening to our discussion. Currently, she was under internal review for disciplinary action. Mr. Adams had instructed her to apologize to the craftsman, and she had accompanied me for this purpose. Though she wasn't aware of it yet, both Mr. Adams and Mr. Smith valued her work. They were considering leniency in her punishment if she showed remorse and changed her attitude towards the craftsman. Thank you very much for your time today. I'll make the necessary corrections and return later for further confirmation. After shaking hands with the craftsman, I turned to look at Lily behind me. I had intended to signal that it was the right moment for her to apologize, but Lily, feeling humiliated, seemed to misunderstand. When I present my proposals, you always say it's impossible. But for his proposal, you give proper advice? Sensing trouble, I quickly tried to cover her mouth, but she swatted my hand away. You give this old man's proposal serious consideration because you're just a bunch of low-educated middle school and high school graduates who resent a beautiful, highly educated woman who climbed the ranks quickly. Mixing personal feelings with work is despicable. Seeing that Lily was entirely unrepentant, the craftsman's anger reached its peak. As I considered dragging her out, Tony intervened. Lily, our company's growth is thanks to the skills of these craftsmen. They are our pride. But that doesn't mean they can do everything. We need to discuss what can and can't be done and reach an agreement. I do want to discuss things with them. But they always say it can't be done and refuse to have a proper conversation. You call this discussion? You always send your proposals via email and demand they make it exactly as outlined. Every time, I have to intervene and make phone calls. Consider my position for once. Tony paused and sighed deeply. My dog listens better than you. It's laughable to call you highly educated. Being compared to a dog infuriated Lily. I have a meeting with Mr. Adams. I'll tell him how you're all dragging down our development. I pulled Lily aside to tell her the truth. Mr. Adams heard everything we just said. You're lying. You think I'll bow down to them? Think again. It's not a lie. Mr. Adams was listening to see if you would show remorse and lighten your punishment. That's why he was listening. I showed her the phone in call mode, and Lily collapsed. No, it's not my fault. It is your fault. What would have happened if the craftsman had resigned because of you? Anyone who can't consider the company's interests doesn't deserve to be a manager. Lily stared at the floor in frustration. A month later, the prototype of the product I designed was completed. When I showed it to Mr. Smith, he was pleased, and the contract was successfully finalized. Lily was set to be transferred to the factory next month. It was a message from Mr. Adams that she needed to reflect while working with the craftsman, but I doubted it would get through to her. She watched me with dark, scheming eyes every day. Her plot became clear just a few days before her transfer. Is the same product being released elsewhere? I was suddenly summoned to the CEO's office and told that a tea specialty store was selling a product almost identical to mine. It had to be Lily who leaked the information. I returned to the office to confront Lily, but she just smirked. You sold my proposal to another company, didn't you? I have no idea what you're talking about. If that's how you want to play it, I have my ways. I immediately visited the company running the tea specialty store. They were shocked to hear my story. It turned out Lily had a contact in their planning department and sold the information to them privately. The other company was shocked to learn that the product they thought was their own creation had been stolen. When they called in the person responsible and confronted them, they quickly confessed out of fear. The other company agreed to stop selling the product immediately. Furthermore, when I showed them the prototype I had brought just in case, their CEO was so impressed that he wanted to implement it in their stores with cafe spaces. This unexpected additional sales opportunity put a spring in my step as I returned to the office. Seeing me in high spirits, Lily realized her scheme had failed. Furious, she threw the file on her desk to the floor. Leaking information involving our clients to another company? You'll definitely be terminated for cause. I was going to quit this company anyway. You'll regret losing such a talented employee like me. Of course, it was Lily who ended up regretting it. After being terminated for cause, Lily struggled to find a new job. While she could have quickly found work if she wasn't picky about the job type or company, she refused to settle for anything less than a prestigious firm. Rumor had it she was contacting all her former colleagues, begging them to introduce her to companies they knew. But no one could recommend someone who was terminated for cause, and without any leads. Lily ended up working a temporary job inspecting products at a factory, claiming it was just until she found something better. However, her habit of looking down on factory workers got her into trouble. She gets yelled at daily with "What's with that attitude?" and ends up crying and begging her former colleagues for help. For her own sake, I thought it best to leave her to reflect on her actions. 6 months after Lily left, the teapot I designed was finally released. It was an expected hit, with production struggling to keep up with demand, much to the delight of Mr. Adams and Mr. Smith. One Saturday afternoon, I made tea with that teapot and served it to my wife. This is delicious. As expected from something you put so much effort into, it's really special. Proud of the compliment, I started explaining its features. I made sure it has a rounded shape to encourage jumping. And it also retains heat well. My wife smiled warmly as she listened to me passionately talk about the teapot. We didn't have children and had chosen to live our lives together as a couple. These moments of enjoying tea together were precious to us. For both my wife and myself, I wanted to continue working on developing products that enhance our tea drinking experience. If you were the boss, we'd all quit. Standing in front of me with his resignation letter in hand, Alex, who graduated at the top of his class from Harvard, was backed by 20 other Harvard graduates. Since he joined the company, Alex had always wanted to be in the sales department, but he was placed in my accounting department, where I was the manager. This seemed to be a significant dissatisfaction for him. Alex seemed to think that they were indispensable to our company. Thank you. This helps a lot. What do you mean? I will properly process your resignation letters. I'll also hand over the letters from other departments to their respective managers. So don't worry. It was a short time, but thanks for your service. Alex's face went blank with shock. The new employees standing behind him started whispering to each other in a state of panic. This was the result of their arrogance, clinging to the Harvard brand. My name is John. I am a 52-year-old manager of the accounting department at a major trading company. I graduated from a regional state university and joined this company. Time flies, and it's already been 30 years since then. 4 years after joining the company, I got married, and 2 years later, my son was born. Now, my son is independent, and my wife and I live a peaceful life. My wife grew up in a wealthy family and has a relaxed nature, which made me feel at ease just being with her. There were many struggles at work, but every April was especially nerve-wracking. This was because new employees joined the company. I didn't want to blame it on age, but I increasingly feel a gap in mindset with the younger generation. Many highly educated new recruits join us each year, probably because they can boast about being part of our company at their reunions. However, this educational background is often misleading, as a high education level does not always equate to being competent. Even among the elite new hires, many can barely use a computer, causing constant headaches for us, their senior colleagues and superiors. Many of my peers are now department managers, and when we go out for drinks, it often turns into a complaint session about our subordinates. The new hire just came in, and he says, "I'm not good at answering the phone, so he doesn't pick up even when it rings." Can you believe that? I hear that many young people are not good at handling calls nowadays because they are used to communicating via messaging apps. In the past, answering the phone was considered a rookie's job. Now, even lightly suggesting "can't you even do that" can lead to various issues. It's become a difficult world to navigate. These gripe sessions usually end around the second round of drinks. We used to stay out drinking much later, but we couldn't handle it anymore. As we age, we lose the stamina we had when we were young, and drinking a lot of alcohol quickly makes us feel unwell. Aging is a sad thing. Moreover, older people often seem to be treated worse than the young, which is baffling. Just for being young, some people act as if they deserve a reward, which I find quite annoying. Even in professional chess and other sports, the youngest players are excessively celebrated. I wonder if this is a sign of the times or if it has always been this way. Women also strive to look younger and are praised for being ageless beauties. There must be some value in getting older, but in this country, old age is often seen as a negative. The reason I felt so frustrated was that there was a real problem rookie in my accounting department, which I manage. This problem rookie joined the company 3 years ago and was assigned to the accounting department. His name was Alex. He was a top graduate of Harvard's economics department, a super elite. Alex, with his impressive credentials, was something of a hero when he joined. Our company had hired Harvard graduates before, but getting someone who graduated at the top of their class was a triumph for our HR department. I had been promoted to the manager of the accounting department the previous year, and most of the staff were young. Not everyone, but most of the employees were enthusiastic and actively engaged in their work. Being young, they also had stamina, and even with long hours, they worked hard without showing fatigue. I watched my subordinates with a sense of pride. Back then, I had no aversion to young people and, like everyone else, had high expectations for young Alex. However, these expectations were greatly betrayed. I acknowledged that Alex was very intelligent. He was quick with calculations and could finish preparing documents in no time. When I praised him, Alex would smile happily. "I've been good at mental arithmetic since kindergarten. Spending too much time on such calculations is a failure as a professional." On the surface, this might sound like a testament to Alex's competence. However, this task was not initially given to Alex. An older employee was supposed to handle it but was reassigned, so Alex took over. I thought he would continue working hard, but soon, cracks began to show in his behavior. He would browse his phone during work hours or disappear to chat with colleagues in other departments, only to return much later. When I reprimanded him, he sulked. "Anyone could do this kind of work. Don't assign me tasks that someone else can do. Then tell me, what work can only you do? At least the work in the accounting department isn't my kind of job. Sitting at a desk doing mundane tasks isn't for me. That's why I didn't want to be in the accounting department." Disregarding his unprofessional behavior, he began complaining about not being assigned to his desired department. Alex had repeatedly requested to be transferred to the sales department, causing me much trouble. There's a saying, "Perseverance prevails," which Alex had heard countless times from higher-ups. Each time, he would pout and say, "Fine," but he never showed any determination to excel in the accounting department. Always with a dissatisfied expression, he would only do the bare minimum, making it impossible for me to rate him highly as his manager. To be honest, I would love to wrap up this useless Alex and sending him to the sales department as a gift. When I go drinking with my peers, they mock me, saying I'm always stuck doing petty calculations. I don't even get to go out. And my pale skin is embarrassing. With Alex constantly complaining, I discreetly approached Luke, the head of the sales department, to see if there was a possibility of transferring Alex, but even the sales department deemed him unnecessary. There was another reason Alex was fixated on the sales department. Michelle, who joined the company at the same time, was thriving in the sales department. Michelle, also a Harvard economics graduate, was Alex's rival for the top spot during their student years. Although Alex graduated at the top and took the title of Harvard's valedictorian, Michelle quickly demonstrated her true abilities in the professional world. The sales department is the face of the company, so making a good impression on clients is crucial. In this regard, Michelle, with her charming face, was adored by the older generation of clients. Some clients even rescheduled just to meet with Michelle. Not only did she have good looks, but she also had a wonderful personality. She treated everyone with sincerity, and everyone enjoyed talking to her. As a result, she easily secured significant contracts. Among my peers, Luke, who had Michelle as a subordinate, was the envy of us all. Other departments also had Harvard graduates, but their brand image was the only thing notable about them, with little real achievement. Michelle is the only real talent among the Harvard graduates in our company. To be honest, I can't believe Alex was the valedictorian. Michelle being the valedictorian would make more sense. Watching my peers mock Alex and praise Michelle, I could only give a wry smile. If Michelle was the top talent, Alex was undoubtedly the worst. Having Alex as a subordinate brought me endless trouble. That night, I skipped the second round of drinks and headed to my favorite bar alone. It's a high-end, relaxed magic bar. I enjoyed watching the magician's show while sipping my drink, feeling a sense of elegance. Seeing the back of a woman with a short haircut who was already enjoying herself, my expression naturally softened. The woman turned around and waved at me when she noticed me. It was none other than Michelle, the topic of our earlier conversation. "John, you're taking your sweet time. I've been enjoying myself here. In fact, Michelle and I often ran into each other at the magic bar. There's nothing sketchy about our relationship, we both simply love magic and happen to frequent the same bar. Michelle had dreamed of becoming a magician when she was young, but her parents strongly opposed it, so she ended up as a fan. We talked about many things at the magic bar and deepened our friendship. In the depths of my heart, I thought it wouldn't hurt to entertain a flicker of sweet thoughts. One day, suddenly, Alex, accompanied by 20 young employees, walked towards my desk. Looking closely, I realized that all of them were Harvard graduates. What's all this commotion about? John, when are you going to transfer me to the sales department? That again? I have no intention of transferring you to the sales department. Get back to your desk. Alex looked down at me arrogantly and threw his resignation letter onto my desk. If you're the boss, we all quit. He was trying to manipulate the situation by bringing in younger Harvard graduates and making them all submit their resignation letters to get his way. One by one, they tossed their resignation letters onto my desk. Alex seemed to believe that they were indispensable to our company. Indeed, many Harvard graduates held important positions in the company, and if 20 of them quit simultaneously, it would cripple the company. At this moment, the company's fate rested solely on my decision. I couldn't risk plunging the company into a crisis due to my judgment. However, I was confident in my plan. I couldn't believe Alex had the leadership skills to rally 20 Harvard graduates behind him. In other words, not all 20 were united in supporting Alex. In a workplace, everyone has their own grievances and frustrations. Especially among the Harvard graduates, many had a sense of pride that they were the elite of the country, leading them to expect excessively favorable treatment. But reality wasn't so kind, and their grand expectations were continually being adjusted downwards. So, what if Alex had approached them during their moments of dissatisfaction and anxiety? Perhaps it went something like this. I want to give John a good scare. Wouldn't you love to see that arrogant boss groveling before us? I'd like to see that, but are you sure they won't accept our resignation letters? Don't worry. We have credentials recognized worldwide, not just in the US. We have nothing to fear. This might have convinced 20 Harvard graduates to join Alex. Nevertheless, I couldn't help but feel sorry for those who were dragged along into this. I glared at Alex from my seat without saying a word. After a moment of staring each other down, I suddenly broke into a broad smile. Thank you. This helps a lot. What? What do you mean? I will properly process your resignation letters. I'll make sure the other department heads receive theirs too. It was a short time. But thanks for your service. Alex stood there, stunned and unable to comprehend the situation. I felt like bursting out laughing inside, but I held it in and maintained a gentle smile. After all, as their boss, I had granted their wish. I picked up Alex's resignation letter and put it in my suit pocket. The new employees behind him started whispering in a state of panic. Hey, he's really accepting them. Does this mean Alex is going to quit? If Alex quits, does that mean I have to quit too? No one could answer these questions. Everyone was likely thinking, this isn't what we agreed to. They never intended to actually submit their resignation letters. They probably thought they could scare the company into bending to their demands with the threat of 20 Harvard graduates quitting at once. However, their bluff backfired, and now their resignation letters were being accepted, leaving them potentially jobless. This was the result of their arrogance, clinging to the Harvard brand. One of them turned on Alex, voicing his complaint. This isn't what we agreed to. You said they wouldn't accept the resignations. I never intended to quit. John, please give me back my resignation letter. I don't want to quit either. The Harvard graduates began betraying Alex one after another. Alex, looking very flustered, tried to keep up his bravado. This is just John's bluff. We'd be in trouble if we actually quit. Are you guys misunderstanding something? Just because you're Harvard graduates doesn't mean you can do the job well. You've all shown us that. From now on, HR will reconsider blindly hiring Harvard grads. All the Harvard graduates turned pale and stared at me. My calm words probably made them even more fearful. Anyone who wants their resignation letter back, line up. I'll return them one by one. All the Harvard graduates quickly lined up in a single file. It was the moment Alex completely lost. Thus, the Harvard graduates backed down, leaving Alex alone. The other employees in the accounting department ignored Alex and continued working as if he didn't exist. Occasionally, some female employees would glance over nervously. Amidst this, Alex stomped his feet in frustration. As I suspected, Alex had almost no respect from his peers. I started to feel a bit sorry for him, but if I showed pity now, Alex would stop reflecting on his actions immediately. So, I decided to take a second shot. Alex, it seems you have a significant issue to deal with. What do you mean? I don't have any issues. Then, what about your relationship with Mary? Ah! Alex exclaimed. Mary had married Kevin, the current sales department manager, 2 years ago. In other words, Alex was having an affair with a married woman. Naturally, Kevin had no idea about this. Alex had probably approached Mary not out of genuine affection but because she was married to the sales manager. He likely wanted to gather information about the sales department and get Mary to put in a good word for him with Luke for a transfer. I can't keep this a secret from Kevin forever. If it comes out, not only will you not get a transfer, but you might also be fired or sent to a regional office. That would be terrible. Please do something. Michelle had informed me about Alex's indiscretions, which dated back to his college days. Over drinks at the Magic Bar, Michelle had shared stories about Alex's character and past behavior. In college, he only targeted girls from wealthy families. I was on a scholarship, so he ignored me. But my friends were deceived by his seemingly kind appearance and suffered because of it. Is that so? Is he seeing anyone now? He's secretly seeing Mary from your accounting department. He knows she's married, so it's definitely an affair. Mary's husband, Kevin, the sales department manager, is 10 years younger than me and a very serious man. His only flaw is that he's too serious and hasn't had much luck with women. However, 2 years ago, at the age of 40, he married my subordinate Mary, and I thought they had built a happy home. But it seems Alex approached Mary purely out of ambition, intending to use her. This infuriated me, and I trembled with anger. Around the same time, Mary confided in me, admitting she had been seeing Alex. She said she didn't feel bad initially, being pursued by a young, promising elite like Alex. The thrill of keeping it a secret at work only fueled her feelings. But gradually, she began to suspect that she was just being used. Her doubts started when Alex, every time they met, seemed overly interested in her husband Kevin's activities and the internal issues of the sales department. I regret what I've done. I want to break up with Alex without my husband finding out. I understand. I'll make sure Kevin doesn't find out. Let's arrange a time for the three of us to talk. One afternoon, sensing the time was right, I called Mary to my desk, and the three of us went to the meeting room in the back. First, I asked Alex if he genuinely loved Mary. Alex leaned back in his chair and started laughing. Seriously? I'm not in love with an older woman like her. But she takes me to expensive places and pays for everything. She's like a convenient ATM. Clearly, Alex never loved Mary. As the conversation continued, it was revealed that Alex had also borrowed money from Mary. If Kevin finds out about your relationship, you won't get away unscathed. End the relationship immediately and repay the money you borrowed from her. On the condition that I wouldn't tell Kevin anything, I made Alex promise to repay Mary in full that very day. I was such a fool. Mary cried, covering her face. Meanwhile, Alex remained sullen, showing no signs of remorse. For someone like Alex, who had lived his life as an elite from a young age, this was the biggest crisis of his life. If he had declared at that moment that he would change his ways and work seriously, things might have turned out differently. However, Alex remained defiant until the end. Are you really going to accept only my resignation? Rejecting everyone else's but accepting mine is just harassment. You've always hated me and now you're taking your revenge. Despite being the one who caused this situation, he was shifting the blame and even threatened to take the matter to President Anderson. He won't let this slide. I'm a Harvard valedictorian, a valuable asset. He won't want to lose me. I began to feel a strange sense of pity for Alex. How delusional must he be to think he is so special? Finally, I decided to reveal a significant secret. I'm afraid I have some bad news for you. My wife is Mr. Anderson's daughter, and I'm the next in line to become president. So, whatever you say to my father-in-law will likely fall on deaf ears. What? You're the next president? No one ever told me that. Those who needed to know did. You were too consumed with your own ambition to be told. It would have caused too many problems if you knew. Mary, listening to the conversation, brightened up. Not revealing John's identity to Alex became a kind of amusement among the employees. Everyone secretly laughed, thinking he has no idea. Serves you right. What? You all conspired against me? Why? I'm not the only one who wants to get ahead. If you had faced each task earnestly, your future might have been different. But you were insincere because you felt you didn't belong in this department. This is your consequence. Mary was right. Unable to find words to counter Mary, Alex looked down for a moment but then desperately pleaded with me. John, I'll change my ways and work hard. Please return my resignation letter. It was just a joke. As a leader, you should understand and accept such jokes. Alex, take responsibility for your actions. I didn't force you to submit your resignation letter. Moreover, you almost caused other employees to resign too. Therefore, I will process your resignation. And so, Alex ended up resigning. The resignation fiasco caused by Alex became a hot topic within the company. Everyone accepted his departure as inevitable. Having been with the company for only 3 years, he didn't receive any severance pay. Alex packed up his desk, under the cold stares of his colleagues. You'll regret staying in this company. I'll make sure of it. With that parting shot, Alex left. Alex's resignation also impacted the other Harvard graduates working in different departments. He wasn't the only one who had submitted a resignation letter. Trying to resolve their grievances by threatening the company was unacceptable. If this behavior was tolerated, similar incidents could happen again. The Harvard graduates involved in the fiasco were summoned individually by President Anderson and were asked to reaffirm their commitment. They desperately explained their actions, not wanting to be fired over this. Afterward, the young Harvard graduates became less outspoken, making it easier for those of us in leadership positions. They were elites, so they would likely become leaders in the future. Hopefully, this incident made them reflect deeply. Mary, who had been having an affair with Alex, confessed everything to her husband Kevin, ready to face divorce. They had numerous discussions and ultimately decided to rebuild their marriage rather than divorce. Lately, they have been rediscovering the good in each other, and Mary happily described it as a second honeymoon. Perhaps this is what they mean by "a storm strengthens the roots." Shortly after this commotion, I experienced a shocking event. Michelle announced she was quitting the company. At our favorite magic bar, Michelle told me quietly over drinks. I enjoy my current job, but I don't want to give up on my dream. I've decided to become a magician. Michelle explained that her Harvard salutatorian title felt like a chain. She had always been made to believe that, given her excellent education, she must use her intellect to contribute to society. Her parents, of course, expected her to follow a conventional career path. Then, Alex's resignation debacle shook Michelle's resolve. Michelle gave a small laugh and joked. I felt like writing my own resignation letter too. I couldn't deny Michelle's decision. Now that it had come to this, I decided to support her quietly. After resigning, Alex quickly tried to find another job but found himself blacklisted by related companies, receiving no offers. Still brandishing his Harvard valedictorian title, he reached out to various startups and managed to join one. Alex tried in his own way to make me regret pushing him to resign. However, he caused similar problems wherever he went. Frustrated by what he perceived as unfair treatment, Alex stopped working for others and borrowed money to start his own business. However, his business never took off, and he found himself unable to repay the debts. Despite his parents' help, his newly founded company soon went under, and he descended into a degenerate lifestyle. He was often seen gambling on horse races and sports, and walking around the neighborhood smelling of alcohol even during the day. 7 years have passed since then. Now, as the president of the company, I came to Las Vegas with my wife, partly for business. That night, Michelle was performing as a magician on stage. I felt both excitement and anxiety, my chest tight with anticipation before the show started. Michelle appeared on stage in a dazzling costume. She exuded confidence, and the audience was continually amazed, their cheers and applause never stopping. Since becoming president, I have always made it a point to listen to others' opinions. My brother-in-law, James, who is the executive vice president, actively manages the company while I often stay in the background, supporting him. I even checked with James to see if he would prefer being president while I took the vice president role. But James preferred the current arrangement. This setup allows us to work in the most effective way. There are various ways to live one's life. Some live brightly in the spotlight, while others thrive behind the scenes. A glamorous life comes with significant hardships, and a life behind the scenes requires a careful consideration of human connections. To others, Michelle's life may appear glamorous, while mine seems modest. Regardless of the path, I want to ensure that I can look back and feel that my life was worth living. I'm only 60, and my life continues. I will keep valuing human connections and live my life earnestly. The day of the $40 million business deal arrived. My boss, Emily, was standing frozen, unable to answer the client's questions. Then, our former manager Kevin stood up with a smirk on his face. "Everyone, I apologize. It seems she has completely forgotten about the mishandling of the previous contract." At that moment, everything clicked for me. Kevin had deliberately failed to brief Emily properly and had not told her anything about past incidents, setting her up for failure. I couldn't stand to see her struggle any longer. I stood up resolutely, walked up to the stage, and stood beside Emily. Then I pulled out a different set of documents and began explaining smoothly. Kevin would have to pay for the mess he created. My name is John. I'm 42 years old and work in sales. I work for TechCraft, a company that manufactures and installs industrial equipment, but the tasks I'm assigned are always very simple. This is because my direct supervisor, Kevin, has deemed me incompetent and never gives me any substantial work. So, I spend my days organizing files and making copies, feeling like a perpetual newbie. Kevin often assigns me menial tasks and, on bad days, even sends me to the convenience store to get his coffee. It's completely personal and not work-related, but the other employees are too scared of Kevin's wrath to say anything. I wanted to do more fulfilling work, but I couldn't bring myself to speak up. I've always been timid, unable to stand up for myself since I was a kid. One of my classmates from elementary and middle school, Mike, used to bully me relentlessly. Mike called me kiddo and always laughed as he tormented me. I wasn't outgoing or athletic. During recess, instead of playing with the other boys, I would read books or write stories by myself. Mike would snatch my notebook and mockingly say, "Wow, you're writing stories about girls? You're seriously weird. Give it back. There's nothing wrong with it." I would reach out desperately, but Mike would just wave the notebook tauntingly. "Of course it's weird. While we're all playing soccer or dodgeball, you're here writing lousy stories. Stop it. Give it back." Mike bullied me endlessly. Though I wanted to avoid him, we ended up in the same class in our 9th year of middle school. I thought it was the worst. When it was decided we would do a play for the school festival, Mike maliciously suggested I should be the lead. "I think John should be Aladdin. He's always reading stories, so he'll be great." I hated being the center of attention, so I was shocked. I tried to decline, but everyone agreed, so I had to play Aladdin in Aladdin. The girl playing the princess cried because she wanted a cooler partner. I felt so embarrassed I wanted to cry too, but the play was a success, and our class got a lot of applause. I hated the attention so much I wanted to disappear from the stage. Afterwards, everyone went to karaoke for a celebration, but I went home and curled up in my bed. Because of this, I still can't stand up to others and get nervous when criticized. Even when my boss demands unreasonable things, I comply without a word, thinking my life will always be this dull. One day, a woman from a regional office transferred to our headquarters. Her name was Emily, and she was assigned to my department. She had a tall, straight posture and striking and well-defined features. She was set to replace Kevin as my boss, and I worried she might be as tough as he was. But Emily was kind to me. "John, could you handle creating this report?" What? Are you sure I can do it? I was shocked and blurted out, as I'd never been given such significant work under Kevin's supervision. Then Emily tilted her head slightly and said, "Yes." Everyone else said they were too busy to help. Please don't take it the wrong way, it's not that you seemed free. No, I'll do it. If you're okay with me, I'd love to take it on. I was genuinely thrilled that Emily entrusted me with this task. Having only done mundane chores until now, I poured all my energy into creating the report. The result was a clear and well-organized document that looked great. "Emily, I've completed the report. Does this look okay?" "Thank you." "Wow, it looks very good. It's neatly organized and easy to understand." "John, you're really good at this." Emily beamed at me as I nervously handed over the report. "Yes, I enjoy doing this kind of work. I'll ask you again." Being praised for my work made me happy all day. From that moment, I started to take a liking to Emily. Emily graduated from a prestigious college and even studied abroad in the UK, which gave her an intellectual aura. She was also attractive and single, so many male colleagues were interested in her. They probably wanted a smart and beautiful wife like Emily. During breaks, the men took turns inviting her to lunch. But she always politely declined everyone's invitations with a smile. Instead, she continued working at her desk, eating convenience store sandwiches. Since I also ate convenience store food at my desk, I felt a sense of camaraderie with her. Although Emily was kind to the other female employees, they didn't seem to like her. They complained that she was condescending because of her elite background. I had never felt that way, so it seemed like jealousy to me. Emily had good looks, a great figure, and an impressive education. Perhaps her credentials made others feel an insurmountable barrier. Yet, the other women, who were married with children, would gossip that Emily couldn't understand them. I felt sorry for Emily. Regardless of marital status, everyone has their own circumstances, so people should mind their own business. The female employees would say that one isn't complete until they're married with kids, but that's just meddling. If I were a woman, I couldn't bear such remarks from my peers. However, Emily never got angry or sad, always smiling and brushing it off. One day, Emily approached me. "Could you accompany me to the client meeting next week?" "What? Me?" I was puzzled that Emily asked me directly when there were other employees available. "Yes. I thought it would be a great learning opportunity for you. Since you helped organizing the documents for this deal that Kevin was working on, I'd like you to come." While I had indeed organized the documents for Kevin's projects, it was merely a filing task he ordered me to do. But Emily seemed to believe that Kevin entrusted me with those documents because he trusted me. If that's the case, I'd be happy to join. Could I have the documents Kevin handed over? Upon my request, Emily's expression darkened. "That's the problem. Kevin said he already handed them over, but I haven't received anything. He claims he doesn't have them anymore." "What? So you haven't seen the documents at all?" To my astonishment, Kevin hadn't handed over any documents for this project. Despite Emily's repeated requests, Kevin insisted he had already done the handover. In reality, Emily hadn't received a single file or contract related to this deal. This is unbelievable. I've checked multiple times thinking I might have lost them, but there's no record of any handover. I'm at a loss. That's why I thought having you, who worked closely with Kevin, would be helpful. Emily furrowed her perfectly shaped eyebrows, looking genuinely troubled. Seeing her distressed, I sighed internally. This was probably another one of Kevin's malicious tricks. Kevin, who still wanted to stay on as the sales manager, must have felt bitter about losing his position to Emily. In the days leading up to his transfer, he took out his frustration on our team, myself included. It was inappropriate for a professional, but Kevin likely left the handover incomplete on purpose. The reason I'm accompanying this transaction is that it has some issues. It must be a plan to throw Emily, who knows nothing about the situation, into the mix. I was furious with Kevin for continuing to torment our department even after his departure. I understand. I'll go. Though I'm just a lowly employee, I'm not sure how much help I'll be. Please don't say that about yourself. Regardless of your position, you work hard, and that effort will be rewarded. Emily's sincere expression warmed my heart. Okay. I'll do my best. Please take me along. Thank you. I'm counting on you. Emily's bright smile made me nod with determination. Since being asked to accompany her, I spent my time thoroughly reviewing the related documents in the archives. Having been assigned to organize files by Kevin, I knew exactly where everything was. I compiled the most important documents and handed them to Emily. Though it took until late last night, we were finally ready for the meeting. On the day of the meeting, Emily bowed to me. This wouldn't have been possible without you, John. Thank you so much. No, not at all. This is the result of your hard work, Emily. Let's give a great presentation. We steeled ourselves and headed to the conference room where our clients were waiting. TechCraft, the company I work for, manufactures and installs industrial equipment, and we were trying to secure an order for machine parts. With $40 million at stake, this deal had to succeed. Several executives from our company were present. Unexpectedly, Kevin was also in the meeting. Despite my inner confusion, the meeting began. Emily started her presentation smoothly with the materials we had prepared together. However, just 10 minutes in, the meeting was halted. The client's employees began whispering among themselves, and one of them, Mark, raised his hand. Before we proceed with this deal, could you explain the issues from the previous transaction? What? The previous transaction? Emily looked confused and glanced at me. I was also unaware of any issues with the previous deal and tried to seek answers from other employees. Then I noticed Kevin smirking maliciously. What's the matter? Hurry and answer their questions. Kevin's prompting made me realize we were being set up. All eyes were now on Emily. We requested an earlier delivery, but it ended up being delayed by about 6 months. Additionally, the delivered product did not meet the promised specifications. How will you address this? According to the other party's explanation, the previous transaction was a project that was ordered by Kevin. They were supposed to manufacture and install the equipment requested by the client. However, by the deadline, the installed equipment was nothing like what was agreed upon in the contract. The production speed and precision of the delivered equipment were significantly downgraded compared to what was ordered, resulting in a storm of complaints from the site. But Kevin took no action in response to these complaints and transferred to a different position, leaving everything to his successor, the new manager. Despite this, Kevin did not hand over any related documents to Emily. As a result, we entered this $40 million deal without addressing the problems from the previous transaction. Well. Emily frantically flipped through her notes, but she wasn't prepared for this. Her pale skin turned even whiter as panic set in. Satisfied with the chaos he caused, Kevin began speaking. Everyone, I apologize. It seems she has completely forgotten about the mishandling of the previous contract. The executives began murmuring, and some directing stern looks at Emily. Emily, overwhelmed by the unexpected questioning and the critical eyes of the executives, was on the verge of panic. Kevin sat back with his arms crossed, looking satisfied with Emily's situation. It was at that moment I finally understood everything. Kevin had deliberately withheld the handover and failed to inform Emily about past cases, hoping she would fail. He must have orchestrated this to ruin Emily's future and to reclaim his position as the sales manager. But I wasn't going to let that happen. Emily is a dedicated worker and a great boss who cares about her subordinates. I couldn't bear to see her struggle any longer. I stood up resolutely, walked to the stage, and stood beside her. Then, I took out a different set of documents and began explaining smoothly. Thank you for your continued business. Regarding the equipment, we have made all possible repairs to ensure it operates without impacting your company's operations. But the delivery date. We can't trust a company that can't meet deadlines. The client shouted angrily. I calmly continued. The original contract had an unrealistic deadline. We requested your cooperation to meet that deadline, but unfortunately, it wasn't provided, causing the delay. It was Kevin who had signed the contract with the unrealistic deadline. When I glanced at him, Kevin was sweating and nervously shaking his leg, glaring at me. Ignoring his displeased look, I held up the new documents. Here is the original contract. Why do you have that? I could hear Kevin's groan. I had found the previous contract while preparing for this presentation. I hadn't told Emily since it was a lot of material, but bringing it turned out to be the right move. Indeed, our company didn't fulfill the conditions stated here. But the fact remains, the delay caused us significant losses. As I mentioned, we made all possible repairs after delivery. As you are currently using the equipment without issues, there shouldn't be any operational disruptions. The other party started murmuring again in response to my claims. One of them made a call to the site and confirmed that my statements were accurate. But, due to the delay, we demand compensation for the loss incurred. The performance didn't meet our specified standards, and we request an apology and compensation. The specified standards were reference values, as clearly stated in the document. Also, as I mentioned, the delay was due to the lack of cooperation from your side, and we've ensured there are no operational disruptions. Presenting the contract confidently, I responded. Again, the other party scrambled to confirm with their company. However, the delay did occur, and we apologize sincerely. We will avoid setting unrealistic deadlines in the future. I glanced at Kevin, who was now pale and glaring at me with narrowed eyes. The contract clearly showed Kevin was responsible for the previous deal. Hence, the executives were now suspiciously looking at him. Despite the unexpected issues, we immediately addressed them. We will always strive to prevent any harm to our clients. As demonstrated by our prompt repairs last time, I concluded the presentation with a deep bow. When I looked up, I saw a look of trust from the clients. After confirming with our headquarters, everything you said is correct. We had missteps too, disrupting our coordination with your company. But we appreciate your prompt response. The presentation then proceeded smoothly, with Emily presenting the crucial part. In the end, we successfully closed the $40 million deal. Afterwards, Emily looked relieved. Thank you so much for today. The deal was finalized thanks to you, John. But how did you manage it so well? Who are you really? Well, as I was about to answer, Kevin stormed over, fuming. What was that about today? And why is this useless John here meddling in the deal? You should be more concerned about your own position. When I calmly responded and pointed behind him, Kevin's face twisted in shock as he turned around, exclaiming, "What?" There stood the executives, glaring at Kevin, especially Executive Vice President Tim, who looked furious. What is this about the previous contract? An obviously unrealistic deadline and questionable terms? Well, it was just a small mistake. Kevin immediately hunched his shoulders, struggling to come up with excuses. His arrogant attitude towards me was now completely gone. Mistake or not, we almost lost a $40 million deal. Do you realize how much damage that would have caused our company? You should be thanking John for saving the day. Forced to show gratitude to someone he had always belittled, Kevin reluctantly bowed his head, bitterness evident in his expression. But the upper management didn't stop there. We have already had concerns about your work attitude. We will conduct an internal investigation and decide on your disciplinary action accordingly. Prepare to face the consequences. Wait, please. I did nothing wrong. Chasing after the executives as they walked away, Kevin was half in tears, desperately trying to defend himself. However, once his actions were fully exposed, it was likely that he would face severe repercussions. After the commotion died down, Emily turned to me again. John, you're really impressive. You always said you were just an incompetent employee, but I can't see that at all. Oh, come on, you're exaggerating. I'm just an ordinary employee who handles paperwork. No matter how much I denied it, Emily kept looking at me with a serious expression. Why did you bring the previous contract? Without it, today's negotiation might have failed. In business, it's crucial to back up claims with contracts. Contracts serve as proof, detailing specific and clear terms with mutual agreement. As I explained smoothly, Emily's eyes widened even more. Be honest with me. Are you actually an elite? You're quick-witted, logical, and persuasive. Do you have any qualifications? Well, seeing her earnest gaze, I realized it was pointless to hide the truth any longer, so I finally revealed my true background. Actually, I have a law degree. What? So you were a lawyer? That explains why you're so knowledgeable about contracts. Did you also go to law school? Emily's eyes grew round with surprise at my response. No. I passed the bar exam but chose not to become a lawyer. What? Why did you say you were just an ordinary employee? You're really talented. Thank you so much for saving the day. I was panicking. Emily repeatedly expressed her gratitude. I had kept my law degree a secret at the company. Although I mentioned it in my resume when I joined. Only HR and top management knew about my background and qualifications since the company is large. Kevin and my colleagues probably saw me as just another useless employee. I was always more of a bookworm and got teased a lot by my classmates. I even wrote novels but was ridiculed for it. John, you have so many talents. That's amazing, truly amazing. Emily kept praising me, but I didn't see myself as exceptional. I obtained my law degree to help people, but then something unfortunate happened. My mentor was targeted and seriously harmed by someone involved in a case, and I witnessed the incident. He eventually passed away, making me question the profession. I aim to help people as a lawyer, but the idea of being hated to the point of being attacked made me reconsider. So, I decided not to pursue a legal career and instead chose to live as an ordinary employee. I've never liked being in the spotlight, so a simple office worker's life suited me more than I expected. During interviews, I was often asked why I wanted to be an office worker despite having a law degree. But I just wanted a peaceful life as a typical employee. I gave generic answers and got hired, leading to where I am now. Initially, I worked hard, but as I aged, I was told not to overdo it or that my efforts inconvenienced others, so I stopped trying so hard. Most new hires had only attended four-year colleges, so my background in law made me an outlier. I was probably treated as a useless employee because of my age. As a result, Kevin gave me menial tasks, treating me as incompetent, but I didn't care anymore. Although I longed for fulfilling work, I disliked standing out during crises. I had always worked as an employee with the sole intention of avoiding responsibility, but this time was different. I couldn't ignore Emily's struggles and wanted to help her. Emily had always looked out for me since she arrived, so I wanted to support her in return. After sharing my past with her, she listened with teary eyes until the end. Seeing her cry for me made me feel somewhat pleased. John, you're a sensitive and kind person. I think you're too gentle to handle harsh realities, which is why you couldn't become a lawyer. Hearing such kind words, I couldn't help but blink in surprise. But that's not something to be ashamed of. It just shows how pure your heart is. Emily said, patting me on the back. After that, the negotiation proceeded smoothly. During the meeting with the client, they reviewed the details, and we drafted revisions on the spot. Given my law degree, we even completed the contract draft by the end of the meeting. The client trusted me completely for my swift and accurate handling of the transaction. Under Emily's leadership, our sales department continued to improve its performance. Later, the executives announced Kevin's demotion. At the same time, a transfer order was issued, and Kevin was moved to the archiving department. As the name suggests, it's a well-known dead-end department in the company, effectively equivalent to a dismissal notice. Initially, Kevin tried to regain his former standing, aiming for a comeback. However, word of his near failure of the $40 million deal had spread, causing everyone to distance themselves from him. With no work and no social interaction, Kevin's spirit broke within just 2 months. He submitted his resignation and left the company voluntarily. Kevin eventually found a job at a subcontractor of our company, but even there, he caused problems. Unable to let go of his past glory, he repeatedly made disrespectful remarks to his new superiors. Ultimately, he couldn't fit in and resigned again, leading to a series of failed job hunts. Kevin's reputation had spread in the industry, and he could no longer find permanent employment. Now, he earns his living through day labor, working on road construction and other manual jobs. A colleague mentioned seeing him looking ragged and working hard, a stark contrast to his once arrogant demeanor. As for me, I still work with Emily. The only difference now is that Emily's last name has changed to mine. After everything, I mustered up the courage to confess my feelings to her. When I told her that I had liked her since we first met, she looked slightly surprised, then smiled gently and nodded. I've always liked you too, John. I stayed at my desk for lunch just to be near you. Really? It turned out we had mutual feelings for each other. We got married. At work, we use our previous last names for professional reasons, but at home, we enjoy our joyful newlywed life. Meeting Emily was the greatest fortune of my life. Without her, I would have continued as a quiet, ordinary employee. I believe that together, we can face any challenges life throws our way, supporting and encouraging each other. With that thought, I held her hand. She firmly squeezed back, reassuring me of our shared strength.